Welcome to the Explainer. So, what if Japanese history wasn't just shaped by emperors and wars, but was actually orchestrated by a hidden, divine plan? Today we're unpacking a highly esoteric and alternative timeline of Japan based on Ryuho Okawa's teachings, and it kind of completely rewrites the history books.
Our main source for this is a text called The Golden Laws. Now, this book posits that Japanese history isn't just some random series of political developments. Instead, it argues that history is a deliberate master plan executed by high-level spirits who repeatedly reincarnate to guide the nation at absolutely crucial moments.
Here's our roadmap for today. Number 1. Spiritual view of history. 2. The gods gather. 3. Goddesses and early queens. 4. Politics of Prince Shotoku. And 5. Esoteric and radical reformers.
Okay, Section 1, Spiritual View of History, the Framework.
Drawing specifically from Chapter 4 of the text, which is beautifully titled The Land Where the Sun Rises, the author claims that Japan's rapid cultural elevation was no accident of geography. It was actually a deliberate build by high-level spirits descending from heavenly realms with very specific intentions. And this timeline brilliantly illustrates the book's core premise. It maps out a continuous lineage of light, anchoring esoteric and mythological figures firmly against recognizable historical eras, starting way back in 8030 BC and going straight through to the Kamakura period.
Moving on to Section 2, The Gods Gather, Mythological Foundations.
Enter Amenema no Kanushi. Now, instead of describing him as a literal creator of the universe, the text categorizes him as an eighth-dimensional Tathagata, essentially an incredibly high-level spiritual leader. Astonishingly, the text claims he incarnated around 830 BC, laying down the foundational groundwork for Japan's centuries before figures like the historical Buddha, Confucius, or Socrates even appeared globally.
Following him, we get the appearance of the beautiful goddess Amaterasu, and with it, a real study in cosmic sibling rivalry. Amaterasu brings gentle, magnanimous, and peaceful qualities that the text says deeply influence the Japanese national character. In stark contrast, her brother Susanoo is rough, combative, and prone to violence. It's a fascinating way to explain the intense dualities in early Japanese culture.
Right. Section 3, Goddesses and Early Queens, the First Theocracies.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the source connects mythology to actual historical governance during the era of Himiko. The author claims that the famous 3rd century ruler, Queen Himiko, who was originally called Himuka, was an actual incarnation of Amaterasu. She perfectly blended spirituality with statecraft by holding weekly seances for divine guidance, actively appointing women to government roles, and initiating the spring and autumn festivals. It was a literal theocracy operating at the highest levels.
Advancing to Section 4, Politics of Prince Shotoku, Building the State.
Jumping to the 6th and 7th centuries, the text shows how Prince Shotoku didn't just passively receive foreign knowledge. He was a master synthesizer. He took the social order of Confucianism, the deep spiritual truths of Buddhism, the political realities of legalism, and the natural flow of Taoism, and he rapidly wove the whole shebang into a uniquely Japanese framework.
This brilliant synthesis is totally crystallized in the famous first article of his 17-article constitution from 604 AD. It states that harmony is to be valued above all else. According to the author, this wasn't just a simple law, it was a spiritual directive that essentially programmed the cooperative mindset of Japanese society for over a millennium.
Finally, Section 5, Esoteric and Radical Reformers.
During the Heian and Kamakura periods, we see an absolute explosion of new thought. The text points out how figures like Saicho founded major new institutions, and then there's Kukai. The author heavily praises him because he didn't just sit around practicing mystical rituals. He actually engineered real-world public infrastructure, like the Mana Reservoir and the Shugei Shuchiin School. He literally bridged eighth-dimensional esoteric law with tangible social salvation. Later on, as the Nenbutsu sect runs forth, you see thinkers like Shinran, along with Zen masters Aizai and Dogen, radically democratizing faith to bring that esoteric salvation right to the masses.
But you know, the narrative takes a really sharp turn here. The author steps back and poses a vital philosophical question for us. How should we view religious reform movements that, in their passionate zeal, become incredibly rigid and exclusive?
Keeping an impartial distance, we have to look at how the text strictly critiques the period when Nichiren roars onto the scene. The author explicitly refers to the Kamakura-era Nichiren movement as a kind of end-of-the-century cult. The text condemns the sect as fanatical for its aggressive rejection of all other Buddhist teachings in favor of exclusively chanting the Lotus Sutra.
True spiritual history, the source argues, absolutely must acknowledge the vastness of the Buddha's original teachings. Traditionally, there are said to be 84,000 different paths meant for different people. By elevating only the Lotus Sutra and discarding everything else, the author argues that fundamentalism fundamentally misunderstands the expansive nature of divine truth.
So what does this all mean? What's the ultimate takeaway from this highly structured, esoteric timeline? Well, the author is using this historical review as a diagnostic tool. By analyzing these figures, we are taught to distinguish expansive, heavenly values from destructive, exclusive, hellish ones, all with the aim of establishing a unifying global spiritual truth.
Ultimately, whether you view this source material as literal history, theological philosophy, or just a really powerful metaphor, it leaves us with a totally provocative question. If we look for the unseen spiritual forces and larger-than-life personalities operating behind the curtain of standard history, does it completely change how we understand the evolution of human civilization? It's a lens that makes the story of any nation infinitely more captivating.